Trevor, welcome back to our show. Always excited to have you on and to share your knowledge and wisdom about supplements and just general health and wellness in general. So today we're going to be discussing probiotics. Probiotics have been a popular supplement for years. I think it's one of the first supplements in pharmacy school I learned about, and they've kind of progressed over the years, and especially depending on which one you choose. But probiotics, why don't you just tell us what are probiotics and why should we use them?
Okay. Yeah. Thanks for having me, Shawn. So probiotics are live bacteria, but when they're used as a supplement, they're in a dormant phase. So they're live, put to sleep, and they're waiting to be activated. And then when you consume them, the bacteria goes into your gut or your stomach and all the way down into your large intestine. And they kind of, I'm not going to say repopulate because they're transient. They move through, but they change the way your microflora or your bacteria exist.
Okay. So tell us, traditionally when I was in pharmacy school, the reason you would recommend probiotics is because somebody was taking antibiotics.
Right.
Now it's my understanding that you don't need probiotics just because you've been on antibiotics. There's other reasons too, correct?
Correct. Yeah. So if you look at, interesting fact is when you look at retroactive data, but if you look at this entire industry of medical or professional grade supplements, probiotics are the #1 selling category. So that tells you something, right?
Yeah,
it tells
right.
us one thing, that antibiotics were an amazing modern technology and modern medicine that saved many, many lives. But the overuse of antibiotics in the previous decades led to the use of probiotics to repopulate, reestablish people's gut system. So that's one large use of probiotics, is just to help someone get back to normal, get back to homeostasis. How do you repopulate or reestablish a healthy microbiota? But the other use would be for immune support and also any type of gastrointestinal dysfunction, GI diseases, and just general prevention. So if you look at the big question, what does a probiotic do? It's protective, it's metabolic, and it's structural, right? So protective means it competes, right? So if I consume a probiotic and then I come in contact with a virus, or I come in contact with E. coli or food poisoning bacteria, it's going to compete. It's protective, and it's fighting for attachment sites. So it's overwhelming bad or pathogenic organisms. So protective, metabolic, it actually helps you synthesize and process vitamins and minerals and digestion inside your gut. And so metabolically, it improves your systems because your nutrients are interacting with your microbiota. And then lastly, structural, you need certain strains of probiotics and certain amounts of probiotics to maintain the healthy structure of the intestinal tract. So your tight junctions are actually held together by lactobacilli, right? Your mucosa are lined with several different strains of bifidobacterium and lactobacillus, and it changes as we move down in the colon. And so just remember, protective, metabolic, and structural this is how probiotics work.
Wow, that was great. I've never heard it talked about that way, and that does help a lot. Now, one thing I will tell you as a pharmacist is, I recommend probiotics for if somebody's having a problem, any kind of GI problem, whether it be, for instance, diarrhea or constipation. Probiotics can help that because they could have a disruption in their gut flora. And if we don't have a healthy gut, this is what I tell patients. If we don't have a healthy gut, it does no good to even take a multivitamin, multimineral, because it's not going to be absorbed well.
Right.
So, and like you kind of alluded to, our immune system, much of our immune system is in our gut. So if we don't have a healthy gut, we won't have a healthy immune system. So tell us what makes OrthoBiotic different.
Yeah. And I can't agree with you more, Shawn, you hear this often in functional medicine. Optimal health starts and ends in the gut. Or as a physician, when you look at education, it's always start with the gut. And even so much so that we have protocols built in the physician community, in the functional medicine community, of the 4 R's: remove, replace, reestablish, and repair. Well, probiotics remove, they also reestablish, right? So those R's are heavily involved in microflora. But to answer your question, what does a professional grade like OrthoBiotic probiotic have in kind of differentiators as compared to retail? So number one, Is it alive? That's the biggest question, right? You don't want to buy a product that's dead, right? So is it alive on the shelf, right? So I said that when you freeze dry it, they're in a dormant phase, and water, so moisture and heat activate probiotics, right? So the first thing that we have to prove in a professional probiotic is it alive? And then does it last on the shelf? So OrthoBiotic is stability tested until expiration, right? So we know at 3 months, 6 months, all the way out to 24 months, we know how much dose is in OrthoBiotics. So therefore, when we tell the nutrition label to say 20 billion, we actually manufacture it upwards of 35 to 40 billion. That way we can guarantee it until expiration. So we're guaranteeing that it's alive. We're guaranteeing that the clinical dose is in the bottle on the shelf without a refrigerator until 24 months out, or whatever the expiration may say. So that's obviously, when you buy a product, you have to know that it actually is alive if it's live bacteria. So step 2 is, does it get to the target tissue? So the stomach is actually a very acidic place. As we know, we don't want a lot of probiotics or any bacteria in our stomach. So we use a delay release capsule. So a delay releases at 60 to 90 minutes in the small intestine and then spreads vertically from there downward into the colon, the large intestine, and then upward back into the lower part of the stomach. It is proven, right, that we have more bacteria as we go lower and lower and lower in the GI tract. So we delay release the probiotics to where the target tissue is for probiotics, the small intestine, the colon. And then lastly, we use a technology called FluoroFit. So when you freeze dry spinach at subarctic temperatures, right, and then you pull spinach out of the freezer, it's not in that beautiful organic plant state, right? It's shriveled up and damaged. That's because there's damage from the cold freeze. Same thing happens with probiotics. That's why for years people refrigerated, right? So what we do is we use a salt polymer coat called FluoroFit. It's just like a jacket coat over every single probiotic molecule. We put it in the freeze dryer, and then when they come out, they're protected. So they're not all damaged like the spinach. And that way you don't have to refrigerate them. And that way they are alive at a clinical dose, getting to the target tissue. So there's a lot of thought and effort that goes into creating a professional grade probiotic. It's not just, hey, let's just put it on the shelf and hope for the best.
Well, and one thing you're missing, and one of the things I tell patients that differentiates OrthoBiotic is Saccharomyces boulardii. And there's some big benefits there. Tell us about that.
Right. So Saccharomyces boulardii is often used in separate formulas. We combined it into OrthoBiotic. It is a prebiotic yeast. So it's technically not a lactobacillus strain, not a bifido strain, not a true probiotic. It's called Saccharomyces boulardii. That's the strain. It is an anti-inflammatory, but is 100% resistant to antibiotics, which makes OrthoBiotic usable while you're on antibiotics and when you're not on antibiotics. But Sac B has been proven to help with antibiotic-associated diarrhea. It's also a good binder. People use them in mold cases and other types of pathogen cases. But most importantly, not killed by antibiotics, included in the formula so you don't have to buy it separately, and then anti-inflammatory and binding ability.
I love Saccharomyces boulardii, and there's lots of history and studies on that back to the 70s with antibiotic-associated diarrhea and Clostridium difficile. Gastroenterologists can tell you about those stories, how Saccharomyces boulardii has really helped turn patients around that no other antibiotic worked for Clostridium difficile. So those are really cool stories.
Awesome.
So Trevor, as we end this discussion on orthobiotics, how would you like to end it? Sum it up in 2 sentences.
Yeah. So I would say, don't buy probiotics cheap because it's challenging to make them work. And so when you buy them in the retail market, you're buying cheap, so you're getting cheap. If live bacteria, it requires a lot of investment. So buy them professionally and take your probiotics daily. It's a great preventative tool, also a great therapeutic treatment.
I love it. Thank you so much, Trevor, for your wisdom and knowledge.
Thank you, Shawn, as always.